I think if you're not really interested in prosecuting the Ramsey case as a prosecutor, it's because of a particular position on the family. And it might not be because you don't know what happened in the case, but possibly because you do.
Nightmares in my head, I fear. Thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. We also find out that Lacey wasn't only explicitly biased to the intruder theory, she was yet another fan of Lou Smith, so much so that she recalled him to work on the case, and thus Lou Smith and his intruder theory unfortunately played a huge role in influencing the Khan's order as well as defeating Wolf in his legal efforts against the Ramseys. Let's go back to Westward. Kolar's efforts to refocus the investigation on the people known to be in the house that night weren't welcomed by his boss. The official probe, so he's the chief investigator. This time he's not with Boulder PD, he's inside the DA's office, and they don't really like where he's taking this. The official probe was no longer about the Ramseys, but about tracking down random, sometimes wacky tips and leads. So that was almost the memo that was sort of handed down from the DA's office, the unofficial memo, that this is what we're doing, guys, and Kolar was going down a different track. And again, he's not from Boulder PD, he's inside the DA's office. Although the body had apparently been wiped down, investigators had found minute amounts of unidentified DNA, including male DNA, mixed with JonBenet's blood in her underwear. Find the owner of that DNA, the mantra went, and you'd have your perpetrator. That's a kind of an analogy to find the writer of the ransom note and you'll find your killer. Also not necessarily correct thinking or reasoning. Lacey was determined to pursue the intruder scenario wherever it might lead. Well, guess what? It didn't really lead anywhere. Now, what's weird about both DAs prior to Garnett, Hunter and Lacey, was their interest in absolving the Ramseys rather than solving the case. Think about that. They have an interest in this case, but it's more to do with absolving the Ramseys than trying to solve it. And I think this speaks volumes. I think if you really want to understand the Ramsey case, you should write down what I've just said in a notebook and then look at those words and look at what they imply, right? Let me say it again. What's weird about both DAs, Hunter and Lacey, is their interest in absolving the Ramseys rather than solving the case. I think if you're not really interested in prosecuting the Ramsey case as a prosecutor, it's because of a particular position on the family. And it might not be because you don't know what happened in the case, but possibly because you do. Anyway, let's go back to Westward. But Lacey's letter wasn't about convicting the owner of the phantom DNA as much as it was about absolving John, Patsy, and Burke Ramsey because their DNA didn't match the material. Now, it's quite interesting that the writer now for the first time mentions Burke as well. The declaration prompted Fleet and Priscilla White to renew their own efforts to get an apology from the DA for all the harm the Ramsey investigation had inflicted on their family. They had tried before to get Lacey to issue a public statement confirming that they had always been considered witnesses, not suspects, and had been rebuffed. Now, that stubbornness from the DA's office is really quite interesting. You know, if you think that the DA just meant well, that they're just being very altruistic, they were just supportive of people and sympathetic. Well, now here you see a different side to the DA's office. Now that the Ramseys were officially no longer suspects, the Whites they didn't want to see themselves back in the crosshairs of speculation. After some prompting from Ritter, I think that's the governor, Lacey wrote a terse letter to the Whites. Notice those words, a terse letter, affirming they were regarded as key witnesses and not suspects. No apology was forthcoming. Now think about that. The Ramseys get sympathy and they don't have an alibi even, right? and Lacey sort of bending over backwards to accommodate them. Then there's the same letter eventually to the Whites, who were far more deserving of exoneration. That's terse with zero apology. Now let's go back to Westward. Out from under the umbrella at last, John Ramsey wasted little time spreading the news. Now this is dealing with the exoneration letter from Lacey. So as soon as that happened, he gave an interview to author and journalist Lucinda Franks that was published in the Daily Beast website in October 2008, 3 months after Lacey's apology. The article discussed how Ramsey sold his big houses, was burning through his retirement savings, and had lingering suspicions that someone in the family's inner circle killed his daughter. Now, I think what the article doesn't discuss is how the Ramseys won lawsuits, including against poor Steve Thomas, who lost his job and ended up working as a carpenter. And I mean, he had to pay some sort of settlement. I think he was sued for $80 million or something. And the article doesn't mention how the Ramseys certainly derived some form of income out of their lawsuits. It goes on to mention he and few allies from Boulder suspect one particular friend who was familiar with the Ramseys' home and details of their life. However, District Attorney Mary Lacey says that this individual has been thoroughly vetted and cleared through the new DNA. Now, think about those words. He and a few allies from Boulder. Who are those few allies? Aren't they the Steins? Suspect one particular friend who was familiar with the Ramseys' home. Right? Friend, not worker, not employee. Who do you think this particular friend was? We also find out from Lacey's successor the answer to the question posed in part 2. Did Lacey know about the existence of those true bills and exonerate the Ramseys regardless? Now, I think I know the answer to that question. We will be dealing with that in due course as we go deeper into Kolar's story. Anyway, back to Westward. D.A. Garnett says the Whites were asking fair questions, even if he's not in a position to answer them all. He says he learned about the Ramsey true bills, listen to this, in a meeting with Mary Lacey the day before he was sworn into office in 2009. So he finds out about the true bills from Mary Lacey. So she knew about them. When I took over, we had a bunch of meetings in the office basically saying, what the hell are we going to do with these? And that's a reference to those indictments, those unsigned indictments. He says, I've tried to run an office as open as it can possibly be to the public and the press. The one exception to that is the grand jury stuff. There might have been a public interest in releasing the indictments, right? But the rules on grand jury secrecy are so strict and so clear that I felt it would be inappropriate for me to release them on my own. And so I guess what he's talking about here is why he didn't release them. He had them, knew about them, didn't release them. Of course, so did Mary Lacey and so did Alex Hunter. Now, as you're about to learn, there wasn't a lot of love lost between Lacey and Kolar, but to be fair, even a successor found the manner in which Lacey had dealt with the Ramsey case weird and a stretch. All right, I'm not going to take it further than that. Thank you for watching this deep dive into the Ramsey case. Look out for part 8 in this exciting 10-part series. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.